Hey, everybody, welcome back. Always love having a panel of authors because we get to really dig into their entrepreneurial journey and how books have impacted their experience. Without any further delay, let me introduce this week's guests. So, your book is out in the world. Are you wondering, now what? That post launch lull can feel disorienting. And I should know because I'm in it right now for my fourth book. You've poured so much into it, but if you don't have a clear next step, it's really easy for that momentum to fade really fast. At the BizBook Pub Hub, we can help you plan for what comes next, whether that's turning your book into a keynote, a course, or a business development tool. You don't need to guess about it. You need a guide. You can get plugged in at bizbookpubhub.com and keep your book working for you. Our panelists today are here to share what they did before and after their book launches. With me, we have Dan Gingiss, the author of Becoming the Experience Maker, Turn Everyday Interactions into Remarkable Customer Experiences, which shows businesses how to transform ordinary interactions into powerful word-of-mouth marketing opportunities. And Marcia Dawood is the author of Do Good While Doing Well, Invest for Change, Reap Financial Rewards, and Increase Your Happiness, which equips you to harness angel investing for social impact, financial gain, and personal fulfillment. Please join me in welcoming Dan and Marcia. Welcome, Dan. Let's kick things off with you. I'd love to hear a little more about who you had in mind for your book, and welcome.
Well, thanks, Robbie. Excited to be back on the show. Appreciate you having me. Companies are struggling right now because it's a tough economic environment. They're dealing with tariffs. They're dealing with all sorts of things. And when you're in that situation, competing on price is exactly the wrong answer. It's usually a race to the bottom. And frankly, most people don't want the cheapest of something because usually there's some additional value, quality, or other things that they want. And competing on product or service is really difficult too because so much is copyable these days. Just look at a company like Uber that started off as a complete disruptor. And today you get in the car in the airport and it's hard to tell whether you're in an Uber or a Lyft because you're probably in both. So they're completely undifferentiated. And so to me, what's left if you can't compete on price or product, it's experience. And it's the one thing that companies can do to stand out, to be unique, to be memorable, and that cannot be copied. And so that's who the book is for, is that if you are a business or an organization of any kind, even a nonprofit, who needs to stand out in order to attract and retain more customers, this book's for you.
I was about to ask you, there was a specific audience you had in mind, and clearly it could be for a wide range. Who has responded most to your message?
So the companies that I work with the most often tend to be mid to large size companies. I came from corporate America and I came from really big Fortune 200 companies. So, people, I think, assign me some credibility for that. And then franchises in particular. And I think what's so interesting about franchises is that they have this added hurdle of having to implement everything multiple times in a consistent way. So that every time you walk into a McDonald's or a Jiffy Lube or whatever it is, that the expectation is the experience is going to be similar. So they have to replicate at scale. And luckily, my methodology is really, really easy and inexpensive. And therefore, it is pretty easy to scale.
I love it. I definitely want to dig in more into this. But first, let's welcome Marcia to the panel. Marcia, tell us a little bit more about who is the audience you had in mind for your book.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on the show, Robbie. So in 2012, I became an angel investor. And I remember when I went to the first meeting that I was invited to, I remember thinking, cool, angel investing. What is that? I had absolutely no idea. And then as I started to learn more about it, I realized how many other people had no idea. And I made a lot of mistakes. I learned a lot of things along the way. But I also thought, you know what, if more people knew about this, maybe we would start to see the innovations in the world that we actually want. And so I started with my own podcast, and that was kind of interesting and got some listeners. But then people said, it would be really great if you could write a book so we could understand it a little better all in one spot. So that's kind of how it came to be.
I really like your book because it did demystify everything you just said. And I thought I had a pretty clear understanding, but there was definitely some pieces. I mean, towards the latter part of the book, I remember you were talking about like the dollar amounts that you it's not as
Right.
much as you think, but it's also not like $20.
Right.
It's not these microloans. But there's a whole world. It's like the fact that you fell into it. Dan, I'm actually curious for you too. Is this like born out of your own lived experience, your frustration? Like how did you become the go-to expert? Having that background, you were working these Fortune 200s. Like, how do you go from having the job to being the person to talk to you about customer experience?
Well, it's funny because in the job, I got recruited into a role in customer experience before I knew what customer experience even was. I was a marketer for 20 plus years. That's what I knew. And I got recruited to this role. And my first question was, why did you pick me? I mean, it was an internal move, right? And the guy said to me, that my boss said to me, I've been watching you in business meetings, and you are the one that's always wearing the customer hat. And you're always looking at our business problems through the lens of the customer. And I stopped sort of mid-sentence because I hadn't been able to identify that about myself. And then he said it, and I was like, well, yeah, that's exactly what I do. Now, I thought everybody did it that way, but apparently they didn't. And then the other piece of it was that what was interesting about Discover when I was there 10 plus years ago was it still wasn't accepted at all merchants around the country. It pretty much is now. And so I really learned when I showed up to a store or a restaurant to look at those stickers on the door and see if there was a Discover logo. And it just taught me to be more observant. And so now I'm just observant about everything. I'm reading every sign. I'm looking at every countertop to see if it's like dusty. I'm looking to see if there's pens in the pen holder and if they've updated the magazine rack and like everything. And so that me being observant like that creates basically, first of all, almost all of my social media content is me just sharing lived experiences, which is really fun and which people engage with. But it's also showing people that as consumers, we see this stuff every day. The question is whether we're paying attention. And if you're paying attention, then you can apply it to your own business.
Yeah, I think so many of us are just living in our own bubble and thinking that the not great experience we had is a one-off, and we're not seeing the systemic way it could be approached in either if we're responsible for that interaction as the person who owns the company or even as the customer, like not able to see like there's a pattern here. Marcia, this is your first book. Is that correct? Am I making the right
Yes.
assumption? And
First book.
Dan, this is a second edition of a book. Do you have any other books, Dan? Is this?
I do. So this is the second edition of my second book. My first book was called Winning at Social Customer Care. It was published back in 2017 when companies were first starting to use social media, Twitter especially, for customer service versus for marketing. So it was really focused on that. And then The Experience Maker came out in 2021, and the sequel, if you will, or not the sequel, the second edition came out this year.
I'm going to go back to Marcia for a second here because it's a big deal. I saw, Dan, you were just applauding Marcia's first book coming out. I do too. It's a big deal. And being an expert or having a lot of experience and know-how about a topic, which you clearly did, you went from like, deer in headlights on this topic to a go-to resource for people who wanted to know more. And you started hosting a podcast, which just has its own uplift to get it going, like technological hurdles, all the rest of it. But it's still different from writing a book and putting a book out there. So how did you overcome any of those voices? Did you have any of those voices about writing a book like in your head? Because a lot of people do as they're getting started with book one. And now part two of this question is, have you now like burst the bubble and you're thinking of books 2, 3, and 4? Like, are you on the book train?
That's such a good question. It's such an interesting time because I literally have book 2 with the editor right now. So we can talk all about that in just a minute. But the book, I didn't really ever consider myself a writer. So some people are like, oh, I love writing. I just want to write all the time. I was like, no, that's not me. I would really rather have a spreadsheet, please give me some numbers to crunch or something like that. And then when people said, hey, it would be really good if you could write a book and kind of tell us all the things that you did wrong so we don't do those things. And there have been so many changes. I mean, to your point earlier about how many people can now invest at a much lower dollar amount than what it was like even 10 years ago. The SEC has made some serious changes to the rules. And so now people can invest for as little as like $100 as opposed to thousands of dollars. But what I did find is that people find this topic really interesting, but it's not necessarily a trending topic. And when I would talk to a lot of people, especially women, they would say, well, I'm really interested in this, but it just seems so kind of daunting, overwhelming. I don't know that this is really for me. Maybe, I'll think about it or I'll wait. And I just thought, well, why are they waiting? So then I started asking more questions. This was probably about 3 months after the book was out. And so it came out September 24. So now it's like, around Christmas time, I'm seeing people, they're saying, hey, I read the book. It's really good, blah, blah. But I just don't think it's something that I could do. And I would ask more questions and they would say, well, you're talking to me about something that's like 501 in money and investing. And I'm still kind of back here at like 101. I don't really know enough about my own financial situation. I'm not really sure about my own investing landscape or what I would really even want to do. And so you're kind of asking me to go through a lot of steps that I haven't done yet. So that is the premise for book 2.
I had a feeling that we weren't going to see the last of you.
Never.
But I also really appreciate you sharing the how you came to realize that book 2 was needed and that you're really leaning heavily into really customer feedback, research, listening to your readers to find out what the gap was, because you had given me a lot of knowledge. But if we're not acting on it, like, what's the holdup? Like, I just told you this is the best thing since sliced bread. Why isn't your knife out? Like, oh, like there's a lot of steps between here and there. Got it. So good that you can continue to put yourself in that position. I think that's kind of similar to what Dan was saying about really being customer centric. In this case, as the business owner, it's helping you develop the next resource for them that will help them close that gap, and it continues to position you as an expert. And I can't wait to talk about the launch of your book and all the rest of the things that are happening. But first, Dan, how do you decide to do a second edition? Like, what's the moment that you're like, okay, I mean, the book came out in 21. I definitely want to go through that again. Oh, you're muted. Go ahead and unmute yourself. I think you had some background noise, but you're all good right now.
Apologies. So yeah, this was a challenge for me, but the reason that I did it, there were a couple reasons. The first is that because my first book came out the first edition came out in 2021, the last chapter of it was talking about COVID. And at some point that chapter started looking really old and started smelling really old. And I was like, it just bugged me that I had put this chapter in that just, made the whole book feel old. So I knew I wanted to get rid of that chapter. Obviously, other things in customer experience have started to develop, things like AI that were barely even mentioned in the first edition. And then, as I mentioned, I continue to collect stories. So I had so many more new stories and examples in my library that I wanted to just expand the chapters that I already had written. So that's what I did. I went back over the methodology. I shared a lot more new stories, so bulked up those chapters. I changed the COVID chapter to be broader about crisis management. I'm not a PR guy, but the fact is that things like COVID or tariffs or other external factors can very much impact the customer experience, and we have to think through them in that way. And then I added a chapter on AI, and I was very careful to make that one not feel totally old, a month after the book comes out, because AI obviously is evolving faster than anybody can write about it. So that was one reason, was sort of the content. The other reason had to do actually with my speaking career, and trying to extend the life of my signature keynote while I develop the next keynote and the next book. And so I have plans that I can't really talk much about now, but let's just say they're a little bit of a pivot from where I've been into a slightly different topic. And so I really wanted to make sure that the topic that I am known for, credible for, and I'm booking speeches for, continues to help run my business while I start to work on this other thing. So it was really to try to keep all of my content fresher for longer.
There's a like future-proofing concept sort of woven into your strategy that you've learned your lesson from that first version, that you're like, how do I write about this? I had that problem. My third book is about how to use Zoom, which while I was writing the book, there are pieces of the book where it's like, go here, click this button, go up to the top right corner. Literally, the website was changing, like completely out of my control while I'm in the editing phase. But I fortunately had emphasized sort of the facilitation technique, the overall purpose-first design, sort of concept and strategy, and the importance of understanding the platform that you're using, whether it's one of the virtual ones or even in person, honestly. And those never go, like, that's evergreen content. The where the button is is going to change. But yes, we should be thinking when like the world moves fast with all of this content that we're creating, we have to sort of think ahead several steps, which can be hard because of course we're often writing on content we initially wrote about maybe even years earlier in blog posts. So it's an evolution as a writer. Marcia, I'm curious about the difference of your approach to launching book 1 versus book 2, lessons learned. And before you even comment, I want to just point out that, like, kudos to you. You have on book 1, which is the book we're here to talk about, you have 98 customer reviews. It's written reviews out of 102 total global ratings. Incredible in a number of factors. One, you have basically 100 people who have made an effort to do this action that is really hard to get people to do. And almost all of them consistently left a written review, didn't just do 1 through 5 ratings. And you have a 5 out of 5 global like ratings as well. So they like the book and they're making the effort. You built a real community around it. So curious how that became a focus of book 1's launch, because not many authors think to even do that. And then what might you have learned from book 1 that you're going to change your approach for book 2's launch?
Yeah. So with book 1, I guess I was kind of preaching to the choir, even though the book truly was written for people who didn't know anything about angel investing. But because I've chaired the board of the National Association for Angel Investors, I'm an advisor to the SEC for small business capital formation. Like, there are people that are really interested in the topic who already know about it. And I think those are the people that really were my cheering squad and kind of came behind me and said, hey, we want this book out in the world because we want more people to know about it. Especially, and the one segment of people I didn't really expect was entrepreneurs, because entrepreneurs are reading it and saying, hey, I actually learned something about how I could use some of these things to actually raise money for my own company. And it's kind of getting inside of the head of an investor. So from that standpoint, I think that it was really like I was kind of preaching to the choir, but the choir kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger as the book came out. But then, like I said, I kind of felt like there was this prequel almost that was needed. And so even though the book was a little bit of a brain dump of everything that I'd done and the things that I learned and how could I make it easier for people and make it seem not so overwhelming, there's just this bigger component of money, talking about money, the things that women especially can get behind when it comes to money, like, because we haven't really been socialized to be talking about money, even as a whole, as a society, but women especially have really been put behind in that category. So it's a little bit more of like, how can we bring this out? So I guess when I'm coming out with book 2, which will be in March, I'm thinking more about like, okay, how can I take this topic, this money topic, and get that out into the world? And then, behind that, hopefully will come a series. And I actually did put the 2 books under a series title called Wealth Reimagined.
I did see that. It already says book 1. It's like, it says book 1 on it on Amazon, like you're thinking ahead. So your first book that you're here to talk about, it came out in June of 25. We're recording this like 3 months later. And so that's part of the success that I'm seeing you're having out of the gate, is that you had this strong emphasis on reviews. So it's great that you were getting a lot of support from people who kind of were in the know about the topic and they were wanting to support you and getting this word out. But how did you actually get them to write reviews? Because people wanting to wish you well and like actually going on
Actually
Amazon, leaving
doing
a
it,
review.
yes. It's
Yeah.
extremely hard. Well, I will say that the hardcover actually came out in September of 2024, and it was under a different publisher, and so I took it in-house to my own publishing to be able to not have to deal with a lot of some of the issues that I was dealing with. So the paperback edition and the hardcover under my self-publishing, that came out in June. And so, but I will tell you, in the first week in September of 2024, I did have 50 people, because I had a pretty big launch team, 50 people put up a review. And let me tell you, from 50 to 92 was agony. I mean, it was like every time I would see somebody and they would say, I love the book and blah, 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 I'd be like, please, can you write an Amazon? Oh, of course I'll write an Amazon review. And I'm like, okay, but it's like really important that you actually write it. And it doesn't have to be long, and you don't have to say all these glorious things about me. You really just have to say, like, I liked the book, or hey, I was moved by it, or it was well written. I don't know. So it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be glorious. Just write it. And then finally I got to a point where I was just about there and trying to get to that 100. And I was speaking at an event that I was actually the host of the conference. And so at one point I said to a group of people, I said, well, it does change the algorithms once you get to 100. Like, it is kind of important to get to 100. And I could hear like the whole group go, oh. And then all of a sudden I saw them get their phones out. And they were like, and a lot of them had already bought the book. So Amazon was okay with that, because they're like, well, these are people that already had the book and for a while. So obviously they've read it. So it wasn't like I was giving the books out and saying, give me an Amazon review. Obviously we do not do that. But people that I knew, and then I told them, hey, this is really important and I'm almost there. Can you just help me? And that's how we got to 100.
It is kind of a lot of I call it polite persistence.
Yes.
Because part of my process for launches is getting people to opt in to supporting the book with a review. Like they commit, they set the intention of doing it, and then it's my job to help them follow through on that best intention, because when they do, they feel good, I feel good. So for that first 50 reviews that you got in September of 24, when the first hardcover version came out, how many people were on that launch team? Can you guesstimate?
It was
like
about
100,
400.
200?
Yeah, it was about
Okay.
400.
So I want to give people a reality check. So for people who are listening, Marcia did the hard work of getting 400 people to say yes, they wanted to join your launch team. So God knows how many people you asked to get
Right.
400, right? Like lots more. And 50 did it in a quick sort of time frame, and then sort of one by one, you got pretty much double that. So when I'm doing launches with authors, I'm aiming for 50 or more Amazon reviews, but I'm trying to do a process that gets about a third of the launch team to take action. So if the launch team was smaller, then it could be like 50%. But I just published a book that's about launching books, and I set myself a goal of 200 reviews in 2 weeks, and that was I had a little bit of a sweat fest around it, because you can't set yourself up for something like that and fail.
Right.
But it happened. I got 50% of 400 people to do it. And then, I'm doing that inch by inch to now, like, I'm at 240, and I'm like, can I just break 250? And I really want to break 500. And I got goals around this. Dan, your approach for this newer book, how did it differ for like how you got the word out between you have your first book, then you have the second book, version 1, and second book, second edition. What adjustments have you made around what you even thought of as an important milestone to keep track of, and a strategy to get there?
Yeah, my strategy completely changed. For the first edition, The Experience Maker, I went all out. I had a huge launch team. I sent out 100 boxes to influencers that were pretty cool. The front of my book has a light bulb on it, and the 100 books that I sent out had real working light bulbs in the cover. It was very shareable, which is one of the components of my methodology in the book. People put it on social media. They made memes out of it. Like, it was awesome. And the second time I I did absolutely none of that. And partly it was because, nor frankly did I focus on as much reviews. And the reason is that this second edition, I should have mentioned this in the last question. The other sort of goal for me is that this is really about selling in bulk to my clients. This is about me selling books hundreds at a time, not one at a time. And so the first book, I was much more about selling one at a time. And then I realized that the way that I was handling bulk books on the back end was not helping me from a publishing perspective. And here's what I mean about that. If I did a keynote engagement and the client bought 300 books, what I was doing was I was ordering 300 author copies from my publisher. They were shipping the books to me, and then I was turning around and shipping the books to the client. A couple things wrong with that. A, it's a lot of work. B, I'm paying for shipping twice. And C, those book sales don't show up in BookScan because they're considered author copies. So they're not considered actual sales. So I wanted to fix all of those things for the second edition and really focus on just selling as many books in bulk as I can, but also doing it in such a way that they show up in BookScan, which for those listening, the real goal there is that for the next book, I can maybe get the attention of some bigger publishers because I can show that I can sell books. And so this time around, I have a different methodology where I'm able to order the books, have them shipped directly to the client. So I'm not a middleman anymore. And yes, I pay a little bit more than an author copy, but that is my investment into the books counting for BookScan, so that, this book is already, the trend line of sales is actually better than the first book because it's all bulk. It's just easier to get there when you're selling 100, 200, 300, 400. And one thing, Robbie, that I do, by the way, if there's other speakers out there, is as part of my speaking fee, I actually include 100 books. And I choose that number on purpose. It's a big enough number that it, gets some attention, but most events are more than 100 people. And so once you get the 100 free books, the obvious next conversation topic is, well, you've got 300 people. Wouldn't you like to buy 200 more so that everyone can have one? And so now I've got 300, 200 sold, 100 that I've given away, but a 300 book order that I'm now placing counts on BookScan. And so the sales is really what my focus was this time. You could argue, and I'm sure you will, that I should also still be focusing on reviews. It just wasn't as much of a priority this time.
Yeah, I think they go together. I don't think it's a one or the other. But what you're talking about, the focus on book sales, I 100% agree. Individual book sales, I only focus on during the soft launch between the publication date and the launch date. And the only reason I'm even paying attention then is because I want verified Amazon reviews. And that means people from the launch team bought the book before leaving the review. And so it's really that I'm paying attention to reviews that are coming in. But I really want a high percentage of verified reviews. And I'm looking at the sales for that period. But yeah, as a speaker or a coach or a consultant, how can you get bulk book sales as part of your process after the book? And part of this is you already have some credibility from book one for people to look at. So it's not your first book. I should even say, like, from the first version of this book, you have like a lot of credibility. So when people are thinking about booking an author, they do glance to see how many reviews as part of the overall, like, is this person credible, particularly if it's a crowded, marketplace. So that would be another reason to have the reviews as part of that strategy for people who maybe don't have the same credibility that you have going into this. For Marcia, talking about book sales, like, has that been part of your process? Are you able to bring this book to places where there's discussion groups, or like who's the audience for a talk about this that you're able to bring the message?
Yeah, I sold several, cases of books to angel investing meetings, groups, conferences, any place that I was speaking. I was also part of a documentary called Show Her the Money, which is about venture capital and how little funding goes to women. And so when we were touring the film, which was pretty much all through 2024 and into 2025, it was kind of a no-brainer to have the books available for people. And honestly, like, I do not want to stand, I'm sure Dan doesn't either. I do not want to stand in the back of the room and try to sell books. So I would always get a sponsor to buy the books, and then we would highlight the sponsor during the talk, and then, or whatever panel we were doing, is if we were showing the movie, and then at the end, everybody would get a book. I would sign it. We'd take pictures. It was, it was great.
Yeah, I agree. I'm not a fan of being stuck. I don't want to pre-sign them. I like to have the books, prepaid for, and I carry a Sharpie in my pocket. So while we're all networking and chit-chatting, I like sign books as we're all wandering and mingling. My book that I mostly did that with was a book about networking. So there was always, I built into the talk that it would end with a networking hour. So, and I was like, if everyone's going to get a book, it's going to be on the table where they're sitting. And then, while we're wandering around, I would just look at people's name tags and take their book from them and sign it. So yeah, I want to be mingling and engaging with people. It sounds like a fun idea until you do it. Like the idea of signing like 300 copies the night before, or sitting at a table in the back for like an hour. I was like, how do you spell Jennifer? Oh, thank you. Like doing that over and over again. The reason we're all here is because you signed up again for the Kindle flash sale. And this is something I organize 3 times a year, where I bring together dozens of entrepreneurial authors like the two of you to lower your Kindle book price to 99 cents. And we all cross promote to our different, universes of audiences and networks. And the boundaries of this is that it's a book that people wrote to help them grow their business, speaking, coaching, or consulting. So it doesn't have to be a traditional business book, but it's a book for your business. And I'd just be curious, Dan, like, what drew you to sign up? What are the benefits of being part of an author collaboration and doing this kind of marketing? How does it sort of fit in? Because you seem like a very strategic marketing guy. So how does it fit in with your overall idea of this is how I get the book out into the world?
Yeah, so this is, I think, the 3rd or 4th time that I've worked with you on these. And, I used to think that I didn't want to devalue the book down to 99 cents because I was worried that, people look at it differently. And then I sort of realized part of the reason why I focus on bulk sales is because I want the book in as many hands as possible. And the more people that have the book, the more chances there are for other business opportunities down the road. I suppose in theory, the more chances there are for reviews down the road as well. And so it doesn't really matter to me how they get the book. It matters to me that they get the book. And so, and then obviously one of the big benefits of this, I think the biggest benefit is that you get other authors talking about you as well. One of the main themes of my book is that word of mouth marketing is the best form of marketing there is. And so anything that helps me provide word of mouth marketing for other authors and receive word of mouth marketing from other authors is a great way to grow your readership. Because I can sit here all day long and tell you you're going to love my book, but if you tell someone they're going to love my book, it's going to be a whole lot more powerful.
Agreed. Yeah, I agreed. And that piece you said at the very beginning about being concerned about devaluing the price of the book, I've definitely had this conversation with authors who are almost affronted by the idea that they would lower their book price to 99 cents. Of course, they're usually right at the point where they're about to publish and they've just put so much heart and soul and money and time and effort into the book. So the idea just, what? And I'm like, well, why did you write the book again? What was the message? And do you have a revenue goal related to the book that is not tied to sales? Do you have other services? And sometimes the reason they're askance at the idea of lowering their Kindle book price is because they don't actually have a plan. Dan, you got speaking and you got other ways to make a dollar off of providing incredible service and value. So I can see if an author doesn't have that figured out, they were planning to make their millions, I guess, selling one book at a time. Such a bad idea. But yeah,
we all have dreams that our book is going to be the next Harry Potter, right? And sell millions of copies. But the truth is, when you're writing in the business world, unless you're James Clear, it's really hard for that to happen. And so I actually start with completely the opposite perspective, which is I'm not going to make money on this book. This is not the money maker. This is not a revenue generator for me. In fact, when I sell the book in bulk to clients, I sell it to them at my cost. I don't make a profit on it because the value is getting it in people's hands. And so I do not look at the book as a revenue stream. If I did, I'd be broke.
It's so good to keep reinforcing this. I feel like there are a lot of like misunderstandings or myths or something out in the world for newer authors or people who are about to be authors or considering being authors, like about what it means to write a book and price a book and all of that. And I just want to bring Marcia's voice into this. Like you've been part of this world, this Kindle collaboration. How do you approach this and how does it fit into your overall marketing strategy?
Yeah, I think this is my third or fourth time too. And I just think, first of all, I'll use myself as an example. I'm not really a Kindle reader. I would rather either read the hard book or the audiobook. Okay. But first of all, I almost always buy almost all the books. I'm like a little bit crazy because I'm just looking, I'm like, oh, that looks so interesting. And that looks so interesting. It's only 99 cents. So click, yes, buy, right? And so, but then I'll also think, well, this book is really interesting and it would be much better if I had a hard copy of it. Or maybe I want to listen to it because I'm, trying to read it, but I have all these other things going on. I want to go for a walk. So, maybe I'll just listen. So I think it leads to other sales like that. Plus, I also have a workbook that goes along with my book. So in some cases, I've had people buy some version of the actual book, and then they'll go and buy the workbook so that they can go through all the exercises. So, I think like Dan's saying, it all leads to good marketing.
I actually, your book caught my eye and I was like, I want to this is, by the way, not the first or second time, like the third time I was like, wait, I keep meaning to listen to this book. Dan, your book's on my list for this next round. Like, again, I sort of skimmed, but I'm like, I want to act like, I didn't want to just like read a book. Like a lot of times I'm reading just to like write a quick review, but like, I was like, I want to consume this. So I actually had Alexa read it out to me while I was driving around. So you could listen to a Kindle book. It's not ideal compared to, an actual voice actor. It's not perfect. But for a businessy kind of book where you're not looking for like a great, dialogue, it works. And there were some times where I was like getting in the car and I was like, I got to rewind, like see where I was, and like, what was the thing she just said? But honestly, it's the only reason I got to it was I was like, oh, well, I have the Kindle book. Let me stop putting this off. So I just want to mention there's that option. And there's also a way to play, I think, through Speechify, which would be probably a better quality.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can do Kindle, and I maybe once upon a time knew how to do it. But so yeah, there's Alexa app and then the like Speechify are two ways to listen to a book that you have. But yeah, I have a lot of people buy a 99-cent version of one of my books and then turn around and buy the paperback version because they want to hold it, they want to underline it, they want to dog ear it or something, and particularly with my third book that was really, it's this manual about how to use Zoom. And I think having it in Kindle makes it easier to search, like do a little control find and find your section. But a lot of people were like, no, I want this within arm's reach of my desk. Like I want it to be right there so I can watch it and read it and spell it. I'm like, great. So they bought a couple of dollar version of it, and then they bought the $30 version of it to have that nearby. And so it does get word out there, but then it leads to speaking opportunities, and then that leads to the bulk sales and all that. I would love to hear any other marketing strategies. I'm going to bring this back to Dan. What has been the most effective marketing strategy? I mean, it sounds like the number one thing is the bulk sales, and that you've built 100 copies into your process of being booked to speak. Is there anything else that comes to mind about either that process or something else that helps you get the word out?
Yeah, I'd say I have probably shipped one at a time from my own home 1,000 books would be my guess. And, that's an investment. You got to buy the envelopes. You have to buy the postage. You have to buy the books. But every prospect that I meet, I send them a book. Sometimes people who I haven't met, I send them a book and I sign it and I have my business card in there. And so when, a lot of people refer to their books as an enhanced business card, but I really try to use it as that. And so whether you hire me to speak or not, if you were kind enough to give me a half an hour of your time on a Zoom call, I'm sending you a book, right? And most people, when you say, hey, can you send me your mailing address, they're thrilled to do it. And again, that's my book in one more person's hand, and maybe that helps me down the road. So I would say don't be afraid of doing that. Pro tip, I use a site called Pirate Ship, which is fantastic. It is the cheapest postage I've found. It works with USPS and UPS. I bought myself a little desktop label printer, which was a really good idea. So you don't have to like cut it out and paste it on. Like I just print the label, put it on the envelope. It's out the door. I've gotten very efficient at it. But like I said, I'd say probably 1,000 copies out the door from my house. And I think that's been super helpful.
I actually am going to share something I haven't talked about yet on this show. I'm doing an experiment. I am gifting copies of my first 3 books that I have in my house. Like I have 100 copies of my books, because I thought I had a plan for sending them out, or I was going to do a lot of in-person events that the pandemic canceled or whatever it might be. So I have a Google form where you, Dan, could basically gift the book to someone in your network, and you would reach out and get their okay and get their mailing address, and then you would fill out the form, put a little note that you wanted me to include, and I would sign it and include a little written printed note. And no cost. Like I want to get the book out, but most of the people that I know bought the book, at least the ebook version. So like they're not the ones who need me to gift them books. But I love the idea of like leveraging them to like pass it along to the person who actually would need it. And then partly the reason I stalled, and I kudos to you for sending out 1,000 books. I couldn't think of 1,000 people I hadn't already asked to buy the book, because I did a big launch and I literally invited the world. So it was kind of hard for me to think outside that world. Like, who should I ship the book to? I'm like, oh, I already asked them to buy the book. They probably have a copy of the book. Like, so it was a little hard for me to suss that out. But that's my play with that. And if you're listening and you want to check that out, you can go to robbiesamuels.com/gift a book, and you can find the form. It's just for the continental US, because tariffs these days make it nearly impossible to get anything anywhere outside our borders. Marcia, same question for you. What's your most effective marketing strategy that's led to more book sales?
So I went on a podcast tour to other people's podcasts. So I have my own, but I also was on probably, I think, close to 70 podcasts last year, or between like the summer of 24 and the beginning of 2025. And so I found that was definitely a great way to get the word out quickly, because it would only take, maybe an hour to record the podcast, and I didn't have to go anywhere, and I didn't have to travel and all that kind of good stuff. I did find, though, that people like to listen to podcasts, like to listen to books, like to listen to other podcasts, right? So I actually found that it boosts the listenership of my podcast, because I was on all these other podcasts talking about something very specific, not just saying, hey, I have a podcast about yada, yada, yada. So I think that marketing the book actually drew people to my podcast, even though I wasn't necessarily promoting that.
It makes so much sense, though. I mean, podcast listeners listen to podcasts. So being a host and getting on other people's shows is a great way to boost visibility and listenership for your show. But also it's just like another credibility factor for you. Like, you not just have the book, but people can get continuous content from you. And it's a very personal experience to listen to a podcast, because they feel like they know you. I actually had someone approach me at a conference years ago. We were in the same membership chapter, but we had never met. And we're at this like national conference, and she approaches me and says, so as she's still holding the hand that she's shaking, right? She's shaking my hand. Oh, I listen to you all the time. Like when I'm driving around the, backwoods of Mass, and she's going on and on and on. And I tell you, it took me a minute to realize she meant my podcast. I was like, what is she even talking about? We met for lunch after the next chapter meeting, like 2 months later, that we both were at. And she hired me to be her coach, because she just had so much goodwill and trust built up. And even though for me, it felt like this is the second time we'd met, for her, it was not. It was absolutely a relationship. And she was thrilled to actually get to know me in person. So yeah, getting more people kind of brought in, and then you get to talk about your book and your work. It's a smart way to do it. I just want to wrap up here and just thank you again, both of you. Like this, I feel like we got to share some advanced techniques, some nuances, because the two of you have a lot of experience, and it feels like you've done really well. Congratulations to both of you on your books and books to be, Marcia. We'll have you continue to come back and talk about that. How can people find you and follow your work? Let's go over to Dan first.
I always say, just Google me. I'm not really hard to find. There's no other Gingisses out there. Gingiss. You'll find my website, LinkedIn, YouTube. That's where I hang out most of the time. A little bit of Instagram, but I'd love to connect with you.
Fantastic. By the way, we're going to have all these links in the show notes at bizbookpubhub.com. And Marcia, how can people find you and follow your work?
Same, just marciadawood.com. There are no other Marcia Dawoods. It's kind of an unusual first and last name combo. So I lucked out there, got the Instagram handle, got all the things. So
that's awesome. Again, all those links are going to be in the show notes at bizbookpubhub.com, which is where you'll also find a curated directory of experts who support entrepreneurial authors through their author journey, writing, editing, publishing, launching, and marketing a book. A free monthly virtual networking event that I host so we can build our community. The Kindle flash sales that we talked about earlier that you are welcome to join, or join the wait list for the next one. They happen 3 times a year. And a podcast. You're going to find all the past archived episodes of this show with great author panels, one-on-one interviews, and the like. So check it all out at bizbookpubhub.com. Marcia and Dan, thank you so much for joining us on this podcast.
Thank you, Robbie,
Thanks,
and always
Robbie.
great to see you, Marcia.
Yeah, good to see you, Dan.